We all know about the lovable, lightweight mixed martial artist from Britain, Paddy Pimblett, better known as Paddy Pimblett. Paddy currently has been taking the UFC scene by storm, and the fans love him. But lately, the YouTube star Jake Paul has been calling him out to spar, and there's been some back and forth going on. Let's dive right in and see what it's all about. First up, Paddy wants Jake Paul to put $1 million in escrow before the sparring session. After being part of an online feud over social media, Paddy has just added a new condition involving $1 million for Jake Paul before the rising UFC star goes off to spar with him. All of this started after one of Jake Paul's fights in October this year against UFC middleweight champion Anderson Silva. After watching the footage of Jake and Silva's fight, Paddy hinted that Jake and Silva had fixed their fight, and obviously, Jake Paul didn't like that comment from Paddy one bit. So Jake, in his anger, made and uploaded a video calling out Paddy to spar with him in Puerto Rico.
Since you wouldn't rig a fight, right? Let's spar. Fly to Puerto Rico, I'll get you a private jet. We can do 5 3-minute rounds boxing
in his gym for $1 million. Now, that's a lot of money. Paddy accepted the offer at first, but has recently just come forward with an additional condition. The UFC star told Jake that he wants the $1 million put into escrow first, so that there's a third party involved that holds the money and distributes it based on the conditions of the agreement. Only then will he accept the YouTuber's offer to spar. Seems fair enough, but it also shows you that Paddy really doesn't trust Jake Paul one bit. He talked about it in a video he uploaded in response to Jake, where Paddy said he'll spar him at any time once he puts the money in escrow. Paddy thinks Jake would bump him and not pay up the $1 million after the Pimblett beats him up. He sure is confident, we'll tell you that. Next up, Jake Paul emulates his big brother Logan while Paddy threatens to drop Jake and kick him in the face. Jake Paul has been seemingly following in his older brother Logan Paul's footsteps. Logan fought Mayweather.
She's a ball player as well, but this is again boxing. You do not play boxing. Fans eating it up.
And Jake Paul just fought UFC fighter Anderson Silva and actually won, surprising a lot of people while doing so. And now, he's looking for another UFC fighter to beat up, even if it's just in a sparring session at his gym in Puerto Rico. Jake Paul in his video starts off by saying that he really wanted to like Paddy, saying he had a cute thing going on for him, but he adds that his remarks about Jake and Silva fixing the fight were disgraceful. He accused Paddy of calling Anderson Silva, the greatest of all time in his own sport, a fake and a criminal who fixes matches. Jake then called him out to Puerto Rico and said he'd even fly him out in a private jet. Paddy, in response to this, says that if he wanted to, he could just drop Jake on his head and kick him in the face. He tells Jake he won't be coming to Puerto Rico, and instead talks about how he's invited Jake to the UFC Performance Institute in Las Vegas. He also added that Jake wouldn't ever fight someone if it wasn't on his own terms, and that he doesn't want to have an even playing field for both fighters. Paddy said Jake would need to drop to 180 pounds or even 175 pounds, since Paddy fights at 155 pounds and Jake fights at 195 pounds. The Scouse UFC fighter wants to meet the American YouTuber turned boxer in the middle. Now for why the fight between Paddy and Jake won't happen anytime soon. As much talk as there is about it these days, it's still highly unlikely for the Pimblett to accept Jake Paul's offer anytime in the near future. His focus for now will be his pay-per-view debut appearance in Las Vegas against Jared Gordon at UFC 282. Who Paddy is set to duke it out with soon on the 10th of December. So he's been a little busy making all the final preparations for that. Jared Gordon back in 2020 beat Paddy's teammate Chris Fish gold. Looks like Paddy wants to get revenge for Chris, while also winning his pay-per-view debut. That would be pretty epic, we're not gonna lie. Jared and Paddy were actually pretty close to clashing fists in March at UFC London, but Paddy ended up fighting Vargas.
Hey, he's a fighter, boy.
Oh, he's a fighter.
While Jared took on Grant Dawson and was submitted.
Pretty deep. He tapped! Wow. Grant Dawson able to submit Jared Gordon with less than a minute to go.
On his appearance on Mike Tyson's Hotboxing podcast, Paddy dropped some hints on who his next fight would be with. He talked about not being delusional and that he doesn't want to get ahead of himself at all. So he isn't planning on fighting a ranked opponent just yet. Paddy says he wants to take every fight as it comes and that he'll stick to the lightweight class. He added that he'll need 3 or 4 more wins to get a ranked opponent anyway, so in his own words, he's just getting on with it. Up next, Paddy isn't the only target Jake has eyes on. 2 more fighters. While Jake Paul's online feud with Paddy is going on, he's been trying to revive his boxing career with a disappointing year in 2021, where he spent more time arguing than he did in the ring, only having fought once the whole year. He wants to have his next fight a few months from now in February. While looking for more possible opponents, Jake Paul has ended up starting online feuds left and right. Paddy isn't the only one. Jake on Twitter called out Tommy Fury, Tyson Fury's younger brother, and while Tommy pulled out of the fight twice at first, He seems pretty determined to make this fight happen now, and while this fight looks certain to happen soon, the YouTube star still has a few other options to choose from. Jake Paul went on a rant on Twitter and called out multiple fighters for different reasons, including Paddy the Baddy and Tyson Fury. He also called out Nate Diaz, saying he's fighting a novice YouTuber now. Nate Diaz just finished all the fights on his UFC contract and has become a free agent. He hasn't been shy in telling the world about how interested he is in making his professional boxing debut, and while it looks like Nate's ambitions could become real, he still hasn't announced the novice YouTuber yet. Coming up, who Jake Paul is fighting next. Jake hasn't announced who his next fight will be with, but he's also put up videos of him and Andrew Tate facing off on his Instagram account. Cobra called Jake out too before he rose to fame, who a lot of people would actually want to lose the fight because of how weird and far out there his takes can be. That being said though, Cobra does have a pretty solid background in kickboxing that could pose a number of challenges for Jake in a fight, and maybe even help Cobra potentially win the match. Who knows? But obviously, nothing is set in stone of course, with no announcements having been made, though Jake did add even more fire to the flames at the Deji vs. Mayweather event, where he squared off against the very controversial Andrew Tate, setting the rumors about their fight ablaze. So with the growing list of potential opponents for Jake Paul, it's hard to say where he's gonna end up fighting next. There's enough drama and tension between him and every single fighter on his list of targets. Plus, Paddy wants to fight a professional football player, so Paddy the Pimblett apparently wants to fight a professional Premier League football player. The Scouse UFC star is without a doubt very famous in the United Kingdom, but he's also pretty well known in the United States as well. On top of that, the Pimblett is actually a pretty big football fan, with Liverpool being his favorite team in the world, and during a recent interview on Pub Talk, he mentioned and talked about some football players that he isn't really a big fan of. First, he mentioned a football player from last season who had just gotten signed by Manchester United, Bruno Fernandes.
He can do the lot. A brilliant strike, and nothing more than Manchester United deserve for an outstanding first half an hour at Goodison.
He said the attacking midfielder was overrated, a bit harsh if we do say so ourselves. But that was last season. Paddy the Baddy has a new least favorite Premier League football player now who is currently signed with Manchester United's eternal rival, Manchester City. The player in question is none other than City's Bernardo Silva. While on the Pub Talk subject, Paddy did acknowledge the fact that Bernardo Silva is a really good football player, calling him a proper baller and an unbelievable footballer. But then he also called him a wrong one and a piece of shit. He talked about when Manchester City had to give Liverpool a guard of honor, and he just stood there. Clearly, Paddy didn't appreciate that from Silva. You can tell how passionate Paddy is about his club. That being said though, we doubt that Manchester City would ever allow the player Bernardo Silva to fight Paddy the Baddy Pimblett in the Octagon, or anywhere else really. Both Paddy and Jake have a bunch of different and unique fights brewing up. Knowing who's going to end up fighting who is something we'll all just have to wait and see. That's a wrap for this video. Who do you think Paddy's next fight will be? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you at the next one.